So I'll start by talking about the information security team itself. You might be one of these people, hired to basically perform interviews or to gather information for a security assessment. You don't need to be a highly skilled SME. They like you more skilled because you can answer questions that are posed to you, you can give more information, you can observe more. So the broader your skill, the better. This might be something you might not do right out of the gate, or you might wait a year before you end up going this direction. There's all sorts of creative jobs out there that go into different niches in our industry. So I want you to be brave and don't feel you need to stay in Tacoma. The most paid one, okay? Well, I'll let you know that when a company is scared, they pay more, okay? So if a company has recently had a breach, that generally means they're going to have to do something with security in the next 6 months. They're going to have to hire someone.
So do you have Equifax?
Equifax is just, I don't know what's going to go there. We're going to have to, I don't know how deep they're going to go on that one. We were down that little rabbit hole last week, weren't we? So yeah, Equifax is one of those. But if you just look at organizations by state, you're going to see a lot of them that show up. There's no reporting requirement for breaches. It's just whether the news media finds out. I'll give you a good example of one. I think I've already mentioned Washington State University. I think I did that first day. Washington State University had the breach where the hard drive in Olympia was lost, right? Nothing in the media now. Somebody should go light that little fire again, because if you look at Washington State University, if they don't have a CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, if they don't have a dedicated security team within the next 6 months, they should. Because they have had major breaches of regulatory compliance. They should also be dragged over the coals and fined a whole lot of money. We'll just see how quiet it goes. Depends on how the news media behaves and how many friends they have in the government. I have to be honest, okay? So if we talk about selecting security teams, sorry about that, about the cutoff, but this projector in this room. So this is a holistic, that's what it says across the top, holistic approach to cybersecurity. The idea is that we need to sort of figure out what happened, and then we need to figure out what went wrong. So what was the event? What went wrong to trigger that event? What was the root cause analysis? And then we need to sort of plan out how you're going to try not to have this happen again. Is it in the hands of the outside security entity that comes in and evaluates or assesses you to make it better? You're paid to analyze the condition. You are not paid for the remediation. Does that make sense? Like project managers like to have a project. They go through putting it together, getting it on the ground, and when it goes live, they go, woo! They step back and they say, I'm done, and off to the next project, right? Security assessment is sort of the same way. We are ambulance chasing. We're coming in after the breach, or maybe with a proactive organization, and we're going to go to the effort of telling them what happened, as granular as we can, then what was the root cause of it, or causes, and then how to make it better. Now, that's a roadmap for the future. If they don't follow the roadmap, they really didn't get the benefit out of the first couple of steps, right? The roadmap is almost always implemented internally by people you already have on staff. Now, that said, if you don't have a security team and you don't have people that are knowledgeable of that, you're going to hire them, right? So that's why I said 6 months after a breach, you will see a security team start to form in an organization because they've gone through their assessment. Okay? They're also going to hire a CISO. That's the Chief Information Security Officer, because now there's a reason to have one. We didn't have one before, but now we need one to keep an eye on all these people and to try to make sure we remain compliant. I'll warn you that CISO positions have targets on them. What happened to Equifax's Chief Information Officer and Chief Security Officer? They're out the door, right? Because it happened on their watch. Honestly, the best CISOs probably are those that are there for 2 or 3 years at a whack. And then they move on to the next organization. Why do you think that is? They're looking at it new. Once you've been at someplace for a while, you become complacent. You're no longer looking at it with a new set of eyes. You start ignoring what has occurred. So that said, you start taking on the role of a CISO, you're going to be like always hot-footing it, and you're always going to be in analyst mode because honestly, you're not going to stay someplace forever. Okay. So that's what the crystal ball is about. So introduction, when you are implementing information security, the human resources you use, like when I'm going to go and apply to perform an assessment for someone, an organization, it's partially my reputation, right? It's the reputation of the principal RFP responders. So you're probably not going to be on the top of the list unless by chance you have done something really cool or you're just a really great entrepreneur. You're going to hire people with cool names that have industry identification. They have organizations they've belonged to that are interesting. Then you're going to need to use these people after the initial RFP is accepted to staff and then also to have cross-functional roles. So a person like me is really good at the top level of an assessment team or to manage the analysts because I have the ability to see across all the domains of security in an organization. Does that make sense? That's why CISSPs are generally hired for those roles because we have that skill set. You're going to integrate that information into best practices. So, like I said, if you go to an organization and the first thing when you walk in the door is the receptionist is out to lunch and you're standing there waiting for 15 minutes, nobody at the desk, what's the problem? So there's a physical security issue. Our first defense is the physical environment, and there's no human being to stop me from plugging in a flash drive, right? To plugging in a device, to looking around her desk. There's no one there. And I'll let you know in pen testing, when it comes to social engineering, the people that come in are really, really ballsy folk. They don't take a bump for anything. I believe, I don't know if I incorporated in this class, I have basically a video of pen testing. Okay, so the video of pen testing is really interesting because the one I used was a utility company in the Midwest who said, we are really secure, and hired a pen testing team, beating their chest and saying, we got this, we're secure. And man, they had them in no time flat. They just went to remote sites. And they broke in and they made sure they didn't leave any tracks behind, and they got access and they plugged in flash drives and they had them. In one instance, it was just literally walking in, and while they were talking to them, plugged in a device into an Ethernet port. They had no security on their VLAN. It basically let them have access out to the outside world and throughout the network, and they were scanning and having all sorts of fun. So physical security, number one. So if I come in and first thing I see is poor physical security, this is going to be an easy assessment because it's downhill from there. Okay? And then your employees often feel threatened in the organization that's being investigated, analyzed. So you need people who are really aware of communication, body language, how they're going to present themselves. In many situations, you would think, who would you think would be the best person to hire? Just by presentation. And I'll let you be biased. Young person? How old? How old before it's acceptable? Mid-20s, maybe. I don't know how many questions are going to get answered. It's going to be a lot of paying attention to the person. What do pharmaceutical companies hire people who have gone through pageants, male and female, who are very good looking, because they can convince the doctors to take drugs and try them out for free, to build that relationship. They're like drug pushers, okay? But they will pick very young 20-somethings to do this. The reality is you probably want somebody minimum in their 30s. You have to think, what first is the group of people you're presenting to? Also, if you're going into like a young startup where they're all 20-somethings, yeah, you probably want a precocious 20-something to walk in. Probably young female, young males who are very good looking. They'll probably get more out of the administrators than you would. You don't want to appear to be the old crotchety person. However, if it's a brick and mortar company, older is better. Yeah, I did look at you, right? No, good point here, right? You want somebody that fits the demographic. That's one thing that'll help you out. You also want to try to pick people that are of the same culture, demographic, language style. So you try to hire locally, actually. In some cases, you don't want to hire locally because you want somebody that they say, well, where are you from? And you say, oh, I'm from 5 states over. And they're like, oh, good, they won't know me. They won't talk about me. Okay, so it depends on the culture of the environment. This is where IO psychology really becomes important in security assessments. You need to understand the organization because it's not just the technology, it's actually the organization. You're catching on to that, right? We're doing both. So a security function can be placed within IT function. There's physical security. Interestingly enough, CISOs very rarely are in charge of physical security because physical security has been around forever, right? First thing we do is we hire a security department. And we staff them with what? Retired police officers. And we basically want to go with a militaristic kind of security force because that's what we view as physical security. That's the security guards of the company. Okay? So that's the physical function. You might have man traps and barbed wire fences, and you might have distance between your building and the road. You might have bombards in front of doors. There's all sorts of physical security elements, locked doors, card keys, etc. So when we start talking card keys, are we still talking about security? Or are we talking about information side? We're talking about IT. You're talking about the IT security, because now it's a system that's securing a building. CCTV cameras are not the security department. That is actually, they can use the monitors and they can watch it, but who maintains those? The IT department. So there's that crossover. Very rapidly, if you have the right person, they can do both the physical security end, but more often there already is a very high-level person in the organization in operations in charge of security. So that's why they end up being somewhat separate. The administration services function. So all the people who do any type of use of a computer, any type of moving paper, they fall under administrative services. There's insurance and risk management. Those are the business analysts. They're looking at how likely is your company to have a lawsuit. So you might, in very small organizations, they might just have a contract attorney on staff who basically also does litigation if necessary. So not HR, but actually, HR falls under administrative functions. And then, of course, the legal department might actually be separate from the analysts. The organization needs to have a balance between enforcement with the needs for education, training, awareness, and customer service. Because it still is a group of people working together. You're herding cats here. You've got to get them to behave right. So to do that, you have to train them. You have to remind them what they learned last year. So that's the awareness training, education, and awareness. It's basically all falls under the same category. And then customer service, not just how we respond to customers, but really customer service is also how we respond to our coworkers. I know most organizations don't get that one either. Yeah, those are internal customers, right? If you get the idea that IT has many internal customers, you will hold a job much longer. And you'll also get paid more. You might get hired more often. So when you're staffing for InfoSec, you need to select personnel with many of the criteria. Also, supply and demand is a really big problem. Right now, supply is low, demand is high. In a recession, we switch. We have very low demand and very high supply. So you need to be aware of what that means when it comes to jobs, employment opportunities, and how you make yourself more marketable. Many professionals enter the security market by gaining skills, experience, and then credentials. That's why we try to, in this program, ask you to front load some credentials along with your education, because it'll help you become more marketable and stay employed. And then this presentation was actually written for this initial class 4 years ago. And we're still in high demand. In fact, it's even tighter right now, depending upon your skill set. Just so you know, we are seeing a a lack of entry-level opportunities. They say they're entry-level, but they're not really hiring entry-level. That just means that those positions are more populated. We have a lot more people coming out into the industry. It means you have to make sure that you add certifications and add more education so that you can compete against those other people that didn't go that way. Did you have a question? No? Okay. What type of qualifications? Well, so from the perspective of those that are hiring for the InfoSec team itself, there's management. So we need to understand from that upper level what sort of skill sets are needed, what type of jobs are going to be performed, and what best people would fit those roles. Upper management deals with the budgetary allotments and how are we going to pay for all of this. I mean, honestly, they can just purely be from the business side, a little savvy about what industry needs from us as security professionals. And then IT management and management of IT professionals, I should say, needs to look at the level of influence and prestige that a function needs to be effective. So as I said, in the upper part of an assessment company, you're looking at the prestige comes from where did you do it, where have you been, and what sort of certs and education you got. They like to throw your degrees out there and say, oh, look at this, they're published and all this other stuff. But you get another step down, and we're talking about those that make things happen. Hence, you're more about what you've done in the past. What jobs have you had? What is your education, and what can you do? How do you interact with people? When we get down to the IT-specific functions, the SMEs, subject matter expert, now we're looking at how well do you know that technology. So if I'm having you go in to ask questions from a server group, and you are not skilled in a broad set of servers, you're going to have difficulty asking questions about Exchange, asking questions about different types of platforms they're using. If you haven't dealt with routing infrastructure, firewalls, switches, load balancers, and routers, it's going to be hard for you to ask the right questions. Knowing that the devices, by the way, helps a great deal. And you should look at the technically qualified generalist, which is what I've been trying to make all of you over time. You will leave here with many levels of server under your belt, where you've had exposure to many levels of server and operating systems. You'll look older when you first go out to apply for jobs than you really are. You'll look like you've been around a lot longer. It's a myth, but you can answer questions that make it look like you've been around longer. But I don't want you to be working in old technologies that really they've moved beyond. You need to have an organizational understanding because you're operating across levels in an organization. I've had it said that I have a problem with authority. No, I just question authority. I don't have a problem with authority. I don't give them automatic carte blanche that they've done everything right. So I question them. I'm very good to come into an organization to work across many levels because I'm not put off by a person that has the C in front of their name on the door as a chief something. I need to know what your skill set is and what knowledge you have and learn from you. And I'm not discounting that you have deep knowledge. I'm saying that I need to know what you know.
But not all of them are willing to tell you that because they're afraid of the competition. Because if they do, you become a competitor to them. So they're not going to...
Well, their whole job revolves around reputation. So if they're not aware of reputation, that's problematic, right? But generally speaking, from a psychological perspective, the first thing you do with anyone is work to build trust. If you walk in the door, let's say I walk in the door and I'm talking to a C-class person, first thing the person does is cross their arms and gives me the center of America, you're a woman dance. I might as well give them like an hour of time where we just get to know one another. If the stance doesn't change, I thank him for his time and I get my male counterpart to come and do that particular interview. Because I'm not getting past the bias. Does that make sense? Don't try to fight the bias. In an assessment, you're trying to get them to tell you what they know. You need to build trust and get them to let down the guard and show you. And you're not going to get that if you're being biased, right? So we need trust. So if it's a good old boy, send in a good old boy to talk to the C-class person, right? If it is a person that is very cosmopolitan, send in another person. Male, female, race does not matter. But it does matter. It does, and we need to be aware of it. I do not appreciate bias. I think it's very difficult for our society, but on the other hand, just consider it one of those odd rules we need to learn to play with. And then as a group, you can do it. So this is a team. This is not a single person effort. This is a team effort. So you choose the right person. If you think you need to send in the 20-something female to get the answer, you do it. And she's going to do what she does exceedingly well. Okay, she's going to come in a short skirt, and she is going to go ahead and flirt and no touch, all at a distance, but she's going to work it, and she's going to get everything you want. Because she's also a technologist, okay? Those are the lucky ones you find. Does anybody disagree with this perspective? I mean, it's hard. I teach you about ethics. I make you talk to each other about it every week. And then I tell you, we're going to have to play this particular game to get what we want. Yeah. Now, does that ethically challenge me? Yes, it does. I mean, I really have a hard problem with that. But the end goal is to get you to show your cards. And so that might mean I'm not going to do anything nefarious, but I might need to use your bias against you to get what I need to know.
Which is social engineering, right?
Which is social engineering, yes. Very good. The people that you're going to hire have strong communication, writing, and verbal skills. They're going to strongly understand the role of policy in guiding security efforts. They're going to have a strong understanding of the technology and the terminology, the threats facing the organization, as well as how to protect those assets. They're not meant to go there and say, this is how you would do it. Even if they're asked, they would say, show me what you do. And I will just record it. It's going to be part of our suggestions. It's going to make your lives better, not harder. Remember, we're here to help you find what needs to be improved. But still, they're going to think you're there to take their jobs away. And then you're going to apply business solutions often to find security solutions. It's not going to be just technology. Sometimes it's a technology we drop in place, like the application firewall, and say, put this here and stop people from going back there and doing nefarious things. Because it's going to recognize one person doing cross-site scripting, brute force, and accessing pages they shouldn't. And it'll kick them off. So hopefully they don't get too much before they're out the door, right? Before you block them. It's going to do that automated 24 hours a day without human beings watching. Okay, that sounds really sexy to business owners. They like that. It still needs people to run it. Okay. And then trust no one. So the entry point for InfoSec tends to come out of some normal career paths. So people who are in law enforcement and military, I see a lot of them coming out of JBLM who say, I have a bachelor's degree, I'm going to be exiting the military, and I want a master's in cybersecurity. So they go to UWT. UWT's master's is what's called a policy master's. It's not hands-on. You don't have deep understanding, so you're more of a management type, which can work for you, but middle managers are often cut out during recessions. So it's not always the best pathway. You need to be, maybe from a technically focused perspective, working with the applications or processes already. If you are a super user for an application, such as you're a CPA or you work in a accounting department at any number of businesses, you're really a good person to go and take into an auditor role if you're willing to go to school, because auditors have to have an MBA. So it's a lot of school to get there. But along the way, if you gain skills in cybersecurity, you become invaluable in the audit process, because now you can look at actually applications and how they're functioning. In the financial world, there's a lot of restriction around how we interact and how we perform in financial offices. Add on top of that the security that comes with actually securing your data. So it makes you invaluable if you could go that particular pathway. Students often select and tailor degree programs to prepare to work in information security, or at least they think they are. The problem is that just because it has cyber or security in front of it doesn't mean that it is actually applicable. Most organizations that have educational programs like to point to a couple of their shining stars who got off and get really cool jobs. They don't talk about the many that never got there. A really good example is I attended the IO Psychology degree with University of Phoenix. I attended with hundreds of people in my cohort. There were well over 800 people in the cohort. Finishing the master's, so that means you've got to present a final, basically a thesis paper, final paper. It's responding to an RFP. It's about 50 pages long. That final paper was only passed by 8 people out of 800. I was one of those 8. Yeah, that is not a monetizable degree, because that's the deal killer. You get to that point and they say, well, unless you finish this, you don't get the degree. So that's problematic, right? PhDs, by the way, are even worse. You could go all the way through the PhD effort, get to the end, and the college goes, no, thank you. So that's PhD without papers. That means you basically did all the work, but no one was willing to grant you the PhD. I'd take offense to that after all of the work and time and energy and money. So you need to make sure you choose the right pathway, that it fits where you're going and what you want to do. If you wanted to work solely in policy and you thought, okay, I've got these other degrees and other experience, I was in the military for 20 years, I got all this I can work with, then maybe the master's at UWT would work for you because you're adding that onto a skill set. However, you need to think in terms of getting into the industry. Organizations can foster greater professionalism by matching the candidates to the expectations of the descriptions, not just choosing because you have a certain look about you. There are standard job descriptions. Basically, this increases your degree of professionalism if you can craft yourself to match a job description. So I would suggest now you start looking at job descriptions of either companies or jobs you would like to do, and there's lots of variations on the theme, and say, okay, where are my gaps? How would I fix that to make myself look more palatable for that particular job? You can go to ONET. ONET is a resource that basically shows you what job descriptions have been used in the past. Now remember, HR people don't know our world. So who writes the job description? Hiring managers may or may not know the nitty-gritty of what's needed. They might include too much. So you might see a lot of things in a job description that don't apply. If you're prowling Craigslist, you're going to see a lot of that. I suggest if you see something that you cover the requirements, if there's the optional down below, apply anyway. Because you might be just that person that they were looking for. You fit them that much better. So this is just a really simple diagram showing what an IS department general looks like. You will have a chief security officer, the information security consultant. Those are generally individuals that are hired to critique your organization and how they're performing. They're from the outside. You have them come in on cycles to perform their activities. And they might focus on 1 or 2 things that you're mitigating right now. Let's say I had an assessment done. They gave me a huge list of things that are wrong. And I can decide which ones are more palatable to solve now. You got to go to the business owner and say, how much money you got to spend? Because we can spend millions of dollars on the actual technology to put in place, but we need to then buy the people who are going to maintain and report on those pieces of technology and keep them up and running and let us know what's going on. But then we also have to realize that there is a large group of people out there working against us, and those are the employees. So, based on money, which pathways can we solve faster? Can we solve the employees faster through education campaigns and awareness and training where we can start that process and then determine how much of the infrastructure we need to secure? Where do we go and deal with this? And if we don't have those skills, we need to start buying them because it comes down to people. By the way, after a breach, you will always see a large increase in hiring in that organization. So when you see a breach, then go ahead and apply. Because this might be within 6 months, though. It might not be immediately. Because they got to determine what they need. Then you're going to have a information security administrator. You might have the manager that manages the people. You have physical security officer. Remember I said they traditionally have been separate. You might have to bend the arm of operations to let go of that person. But it's better to have them all in the same chain of command. So that if you say, okay, in physical security, we now need badges. Everyone who's an employee whose access needs to wear a badge so they can be identified with their picture. But now we need to also, before we give them the badge and the keys, give them education, not to leave them in their car seat, not to walk around off campus like this, because then it can be socially engineered, right? So now you've got to give them the rules of having the badge. So now we're back to an awareness and education. It's just a really lightweight kind of structure. Now this structure, prior to a breach, almost never exists. You have a CIO. What does the CIO do? Anybody know? Anything that has to do with information technology, programmers, hardware technicians, desktop support, database analysts, all those fall under the information officer. Those are actually two separate, distinct skills. In fact, your information security officer can even say, I'm so focused as I'm only going to deal with the customer side. All other nefarious humans fall over here under this scary thing called security. So that's why there's so many layers here, because now we're actually building a secure organization. We're saying we're not going to be beating you over the head with billy clubs. That's not what we're going for here. But this means that we're going to put devices in place that are going to audit usage of the network. And if you run afoul of that, we have to have a policy in place that has teeth that can make it so that you are let go, even if you're a customer. That means you need to have a security policy not just for employees, not just for vendors, not just for customers as well. Does that make sense? Because aren't your customers potentially doing you harm? Okay, well, if they're caught misusing your resources, don't you want them off the boat? Okay, if you have a vendor that's caught hiring people without the correct papers to do janitorial, right? They've hired somebody that is not suited for the environment. That's a reason for them to lose their contract, not just to fire the employee. That's too easy. That doesn't stop them from doing it again, does it? So you need a policy that has more teeth to it. Does that make sense? So being a CISO is a hard job. That's why you tend not to live long in that organization. You tend to be there politically for no more than 3 years. That might be a stretch, because you're a change agent. You bring in change into an organization.
Can you hold a CISSP to be
A CISO?
Yeah.
Okay, so yes. Generally speaking, one of the prior things you need to have accomplished is the CISSP. There are other certifications you can have, but they're not as global. They're more focused on finance or auditing or forensics. And so they really want you to have a global perspective. The longer you've had your CISSP, the better. So if you get it earlier in your career, that's better. So this sort of leads into the conversation about the CISO. The Chief Information Officer may even report to the Chief Information Officer. Now, just because you're C-class doesn't mean you're all even, right? And if you have an ego that doesn't allow that, that might not be the relationship you need. I look at it this way. A Chief Information Officer, if I've got to report to that person, then that person basically has me as a fall guy. If something goes wrong, it could point at me and have me out the door. My goal is to make sure that if we have teams that cross-function, that we work together, rather than saying, these are all my folks and these are all your folks, that to say we, sort of like co-parenting, are parenting this entire group, and we agree how we're going to function. A little harder road. You got to have people that agree to that, and chief officers generally have an ego to deal with, so you got to be a little careful there, right? This person is going to manage both the strategic plans, or the planning for the organization, budgeting, how things are going to be spent. So you can see how Chief Information Officer, if you've got both present, you really need them to work together. You don't want them fighting for resources. A lot of times their resources are going to overlap. Sometimes the CIO says, I want everything over here that has nothing to do with security, but everything in IT has to do with security, right? So it's really hard to do. And it's going to be setting the priorities for projects. Now, if you have two of them and they work together, they can set projects that work across both. And you can choose technologies that work across both. But if you have a CIO that says, well, I'm just going to build this server farm, and it really is hard to secure, we're in trouble, right? Okay. The hiring, firing decisions are made at this level. or basically recommendations. So it depends. Boards, the people above hire these people. So really the decision makers, the investors make these decisions. People below, all management, are finalized by CISOs and CIOs, CTOs. Okay? You may never meet one, by the way. You might work in a big organization and never come within those rarefied parts of the building that have the CTO, the CIO, or the CISO. And that's okay, but remember that they do directly concern themselves with your care and feeding and welfare. So you need to think in terms of what do they need to make good decisions. Your security manager, that's the person directly above any of the SMEs, is accountable for the day-to-day operation of the security program. The Network Operations Center is generally under the CIO, but they can also merge them and call them a security operations center. In many organizations like eBay and PayPal, they're the same group. They used to be separate, now they're one. They came up separately. One was already existing under the CIO. They came up, and then once they realized they're redundant, they merged them together. So they're populated by both teams at the same time. Typical qualifications, really, this person's going to help draft policies, gather information, assure that the policies are being followed, make plans for implementations of training and different rollouts and updates. So when Equifax experienced a problem with their updates not occurring on a timely basis, something was going wrong between these middle managers and the top. The top fell, but really, they didn't tell you probably everybody along that chain is also moved around. The security technician, those are the SMEs. They're going to be subject matter experts in their particular area. Most of the ones I encounter that manage devices, routers, switches, load balancers, firewalls, and all of the other security appliances that we're now putting in place are coming out of routing and switching. But, you know, there's those rare ones. I come across occasionally the microbiology master's holder who decided to go into security. So they studied for a Cisco routing and switching exam, maybe the Security Plus, and they said, I'll go do that. But they're really good at thinking their way through problems. That's part of why they're there. They may actually be an expert in a particular type of hardware or software and experienced in the particular technology that's being used. InfoSec credentials that are desired include the CISSP and SSCP. CISA is the associate level equivalent to the other side, CISM. The GIAC and SCP are more from the perspective of auditing and forensics. And then, of course, we have Certified Forensics Investigator, Security Plus. Those are all basically the entry-level certifications for that particular side of the house. There's cost to being certified. How many people have taken the A+? Not yet, okay. You could go to Professor Messer, there's tests there, there's practice, there's reading material. The reality is that going straight to CompT as practice test is the best way to go if you're taking a CompT exam. And you just pound yourself with those questions. You write them down and you do flashcards. I mean, really, that is what it's like. That said, don't take the Security Plus exam until you understand how to secure a firewall. Because the first quarter of the exam is just how to do that. Literally, they give you diagrams, they do it. So unless you can do that, don't take the Security Plus because you probably won't get it the first time out. You want to do all the homework that's provided, all of the reading that you can get your hands on, and then, of course, review the exam criteria and take lots of practice tests. The CISSP is really an exception to the rule. I've heard it said when it comes to cryptography, you basically forget everything you learned, go learn what they're trying to tell you, and then go out and take the test. Because it's not exactly what the real world does. So if you've been doing it in the real world, you've got to learn how it's testing, which is different. I have a really good A+ exam question that just beat my daughter over the head. The practice exams through WGU kept saying you need to have a positive charge on the corona to get the ink to the paper. And it's like 600 volts kind of thing. And I kept saying, no, it's a negative charge. It's electrostatic, and that's how it works. But because the test always said positive, she shows me, she says, look, it says positive. Here's the answer. And I said, then that's what it is. It doesn't matter how it functions. I worked on the same fusers we use today. I rebuilt them in the 80s. So, and I'm an electronic technician by trade in the 80s. 70s and 80s, I was an electronic technician. So just have to answer the question the way they write it. It doesn't make a lot of sense to you at that point if you try to go too deep into it. You study, practice, and prepare us with everything. And then some advice from InfoSec professionals. The benefit is everyone that I have hired in the past for this program has worked in the industry. So they're bringing hands-on experience, understanding of our world. So you always need to remember it's business and people before technology. In fact, before you go to the CISSP, you need to get the mantra in your head. Whatever the question is, if it's people versus technology, people always win. Well, it doesn't matter what the answer is. If it has people in it, people always win. Because that's the way the CISSP has to work. It's society first, technology next. Technology provides elegant solutions for some problems and adds more difficulty on top of others. If the organization and the people do not have good process, the technology will probably make it harder in the short term and maybe into the long term. Because they're going to try to circumvent the technology. Never lose sight of the goal, protect and serve. And that's true in all senses of our role. We are a support entity. We are not the creators of programs. Programmers have pretty big egos, by the way. They've got this God complex happening. So just got to remember, we're here to protect and serve, and that's okay. We're helping personalities anyway. You are to be heard but not seen. Generally speaking, if you do not have reporting working from you, no one will know what you're doing because you're never around. You are always doing things when people are not around. So you're never seen, but you need to have reporting speak for you. You need your management to know what you do, how you do it, and why it's so important. Know more than you say and be more skillful than you let on. So basically, know a lot. You don't have to be the first one to put their hand up and the answer first comes from you, but you need to be a participant in the solution. Speak to the users, not at them. I always ask before I touch a keyboard, do you mind if can I show you, please? And I ask. I don't just jump in there and say, out of the way. It's not IT crowd, right? And this applies to people in any meeting you're in. That doesn't mean they're not going to think you're doing that. Their interpretation of your language, you're from IT, you must talk down to us, you think you're above us. Can't get past that one, right? And then your education is never complete. You will be constantly learning moving forward. I will let you know that 6 months ago, what I knew is changed from now. What I thought was okay, meaning we will not see a botnet over 500,000. That was a year ago. We will not see, and I generally don't speak in that kind of terms, but if I had said, we will not see an attack over 100 plus gig. 300 gig. We saw we'll not go over 300 gig. That's an amazing size attack. Oh, we now have many million member botnets. We have members of botnets that overlap between botnets. So they're a member of more than one botnet. And we also have attacks that are exceeding a terabyte. Now, when we get those attacks that exceed a terabyte, we start seeing regions go down. And we've seen that with Europe, with Petya and not Petya. We saw WannaCry, right? And we saw the DYDNS fiasco last year. So we can't say it won't happen. Yeah. And you don't stand there and beat your chest out on the edge of the sea, looking across at someone else and saying, I dare you to take down my utility companies. That is not a smart thing to do. Okay? Because just because that's going to happen, right? And then they get to say, look what we did. I believe in don't make yourself a target unless you really, 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 really feel the need to. And then so many times we can't avoid it. So employment policies and practices. Remember that management is about community interest. It's about the interest of the organization. A lot of policies focus on minimizing litigation, right? I tell you, you're not allowed to discriminate against anybody else in the company. It's a policy. It's also supported by federal government because if I don't say this in public and you say something nasty to the guy next door to you and you litigate, you're going to win. And I'm going to pay lots and lots of money in regulatory fines. That doesn't make the problem better. I still need to educate my organization. I still need to make sure everybody knows this is what you do and this is what you don't do. But the reality is management's interest often falls under minimizing litigation. When we talk about security, yes, we're minimizing litigation, but we're really talking about educating you and what the new rules are. Because I think I've mentioned this before. Law is the basic premise of where you function in society and the difference between the bad guys and the average human being. We are needing to function way beyond that. We need levels of behavior that we can't ask the rest of the community around us to behave like. But in an organization, you can. And policies are the laws of a company. It also makes it so we're all treated freely and fairly. So if I say, you are not allowed to make large downloads or post on social media nasty things about the company. And over here, you go ahead and do it, but you got fired. You can point to the policy and say, I'm not being fair. I'm negligent. Does that make sense? So it's in your best interest, but also mine as a business. The policies also have to be from the perspective that the employee is a responsibility and that there are these people who are coming to the organization with potential pitfalls and liabilities. So let's say you're hired into an organization and you have absolutely no clue about the idea of propping a door open. You used to work for an auto body shop and you propped the door open and that was okay. You go outside and have a cigarette. But you're now working in a middle-sized company and you're in the shipping department and you step outside, you prop the door open. What? You've done that in every company you've worked for and it's never been a problem. I'm not smoking out front. I'm not near any public door. I'm out here in the back by the garbage can. But you've made this huge security hole in the company. You've left the door open. So first, whose problem is that? Should I fire him for propping the door open? First, it's a warning, and we re-educate if you haven't been educated. Maybe you slipped through the hole somewhere and didn't get the training, you were brought on fast, whatever. First, we have to take the perspective, you need to be re-educated. We're not propping open doors. We're not going to let someone follow us into the building, even if you saw them last week, because they might not be employed with us anymore this week, right? So there's all sorts of new rules you need to learn that in your previous organization or life you've never been exposed to. There's a lot of people that have never worked for a corporation where this idea of scanning your badge and letting 5 people walk in was foreign. Well, that's not a best practice, but where they'd been before, that wasn't foreign. They're being friendly. They're being a good community member. Everybody doesn't have to scan their badge. But I'll guarantee you, if you work for Microsoft, every single human scans their badge when they walk in and out of every building. And they've been trained that that's for security. It really is. It's to also know who's in that building when the thing falls down, right? It's more than just for stopping people from riding along and piggybacking on your tail. So the CISO works with information security managers, human resources. They want to make sure that the personnel guidelines reflect what the security needs are of the organization, which has now changed. Job descriptions need to integrate security perspectives. So if you're hiring a receptionist, the receptionist can't be some fey young thing who won't question people when they walk in the door. I think it's time to get the woman who's been there and done that with the kids and sees you walking there and says, hey, where are you going? Okay? Maybe we want to have a nice face on her, but then when the teeth come out, she can bark, okay? You want her to be quick on the button to lock that door if necessary, because she's your front line of defense when someone comes in and is going to be abusive, right? I love man traps. Man traps are great. Slam the door on the second one. Get them caught in the middle. You're ranting and raving because you want to see your wife, and you're right in the middle. You're not going anywhere till the police show up. Receptionist just sits down. You got the little eyes, right? Calling the police. So man traps are great, but you got to have somebody that's fast and is willing to react and trained to respond. And you should be trained to avoid revealing your password. I had a student ask, we were in the other room, you're given a wireless access code to someone's access point. Is it okay to use it? Well, how long ago did they give it to you? It's not forever, right? You can't assume that you should be able to access it all the time. And our systems remember, so that's maybe just friendly because you came over for a cocktail party. You shouldn't sit next door and use my bandwidth to look at porn. So it all is in perspective, right? But it comes from you knowing what the rules are. Duties as assigned is often part of an InfoSec role. It's bad, though, because if you put duties as assigned at the bottom of a job description, you can have somebody that has huge amounts of power and influence, speaking from perspective, right, without there being any responsibility to report what that is. So when that person leaves a company, they take all their knowledge and experience and talent with them. You can end up with huge holes. It's actually in your best interest to make sure if you give me a task that's specific to me, it's added to my job description. Yes, you might have to compensate me more. But there's all sorts of ways around that one too. Interviews. When you're opening a position in a department, such as information security, this is a unique opportunity to both educate the HR department on what a certification looks like and which ones are really more applicable. I spend a lot of time actually rewriting job descriptions that don't fit the jobs you're having people do. So if you put everything in the kitchen sink on there, nobody's going to apply that has what you need. In fact, you're going to get some really weird applicants. So an example would be, we have a job of an instructor here, right? All of us. When I rewrote the job description, I made it applicable to this program's needs. I was told, oh no, HR doesn't want that change. They don't want it that complex. And I said, but these are the things we need. I mean, this job description is from 15 years ago. Oh, no, we want to leave it here. A bachelor's degree is what's required. And you don't have to have any knowledge of security. And I said, do you know our students, there are students that could apply for this job now who are in the program just because they have a bachelor's degree. And that's how it's written. And they have no experience in the industry. So that's not applicable to the job that needs to be done. So you need to re-look at what you're going to be hiring in the way of skills so you get the right people. If you don't need them to understand programming, programming shouldn't be on there, as an example. If on-site visits is part of the interviews, then you need to make sure you just don't walk the client around the office. I brought into some very large organizations, and they have some of them have been really secure and some lightly secured. Even the lightly secured ones don't let me have too much impact on their employees, because employees get scared when somebody new walks through the building, right? So you don't want to just take them on a tour for the building, because there's so much you learn walking through a building, right? I'll give you an example. I went to Switch SuperNap, which is in Nevada, and they're in Las Vegas, Reno, and Phoenix. Huge data centers. Their data centers are numerous football field in size. They're cooling units. Each building has a minimum of 10 cooling units, and these cooling units are the size of houses, and they snuggle up next to, like big mobile homes, but double story, and they snuggle up next to the building. And they provide backup power and air handling in the case of like dust storms. They actually close the dampers and completely can power the building for like a whole day. Amazing backups that they have. I went there, I pull up to the gate, and there's 30-foot steel gates, 30-foot tall walls with concertina wire across the top. And I talk into the box, and I tell them who I am. We'll be out in a sec. Out comes this Humvee. This is a private organization, mind you. It's not a military organization. Black Humvee, all color coding, matched the logo and the company look and feel. And the guy gets out. He's got an M16 over his shoulder. He says, follow me. So now drive in. He says, do not, before I move, he goes, do not deviate, do not turn, do not park anywhere you're not supposed to be. Follow me, and when I point there. Park there. Okay, so I do that. He gets out of his Humvee. He comes over and he stands next to my door. I get out, take all my stuff. He says, okay, just so you know, when you come in, you're going to have to give us all your stuff. We're going to search everything. If you have flash drives, we're taking them. I said, can I have them when I come back out? Because it's something that the company makes me carry. He goes, yeah, you can have them back, but you can't bring them in. I said, okay. So we go in, and basically I hand them my equipment. They take it all apart. In their guard shack, so I'm in a big man trap. So it's a big entry area. And in their guard shack area, they basically have taken apart all my stuff in front of me in glass in a separate space. The wall is full of M16s. They've got eyes a quarter mile away from the building. So they can, and how I found that out was when I left, the second day I needed a taxi to pick me up. And they told me when the taxi was coming, he was a quarter mile away. He was a couple blocks away from the main entrance, and then he missed, and they said, oh, look, he missed. They're making commentary. But literally, they shook me down. They have rubber floors that suck the debris off your feet as you're going in, and then I go into a second man trap. So I got to get through another one, and then finally I get into a room where I can train people. But I never was allowed to go anywhere without an escort, and this is not a military installation. This is an extreme form of physical security. Take no chances kind of thing. So you can have an organization that goes to that level. Not many organizations would tolerate that level. You have to really be protecting something really important. Everybody has to buy in, of course. But yeah, so that's really over the top with the physical security. But if you worked for a Google data center, you might see that level of security. You're going to experience background checks. And just about any job you go to now, you're going to do a piss test, right? Some of them require more out of you. Some require blood samples. Some require hair samples. There are some that go much deeper than just what have you had in the past week. They're also potentially going to do a credit check, criminal background check. If you ever see on an application, I want to know if you have had anything nefarious in your background, anything greater than a misdemeanor, basically, in the past 10 years, you have to tell them. Don't try to hide it. It's going to come out. If they say, in your lifetime, have you ever had anything, any greater, a misdemeanor or greater, you have to tell them everything. Because anything higher than a misdemeanor is reported now to the FBI. It has been for the last 30 years. Does that preclude you from finding employment? What do you think? No, I had a student a couple years back, it was like 5 years back. He had gone through the program, he graduated, and it was 2 years later, he walks into my office and he says, I need your help. And I said, what's up? He goes, well, okay, I graduated, I was over visiting my girlfriend over in Spokane, and I had gone out drinking, and I was on my way back to my hotel, and I got pulled over by a cop. And I said, okay, and so what happened next? He goes, well, I decided I was pretty drunk, and he was pretty belligerent, and so he told me to sit in my car, and I decided to back up into his car a couple of times.
Several times.
Yeah. And basically that's all I did. But it turned into 2 years at Walla Walla. Yeah, it was him against me kind of moment, right? And so he comes in, he says, so I'm scared. I'm out now. He says, I've been, studying while I was in there. I now have my bachelor's degree. Am I going to be employed? It's not too often I do this, but I knew what was going on here. I called up one of the advisors for the program, and I said, we have a rare situation here. We have somebody, he's not a miscreant. He had a bad moment. He did some young, stupid thing, and now he's much older, and I think he's learned his lesson. Would you consider interviewing you? I know that you have a customer support position open. And he said, yeah, send him over. Are you sure? I said, yeah. I said, I'm sure. I knew him before. I see what we got going now. I talked to some of the people involved, and he said, I think we need to see if we can give him another chance. He's still employed by this company, by the way. I told him exactly how to answer questions, how to answer his history, how to address it when he went to the interview. And I said, and I'm going to tell you something I very rarely tell students, do not leave this job if they love you and decide to keep you. Because it's going to be really hard on you in the future. You need to ride this out. And so look at it as another chance. Make a different life. And so anyway, he's there, but this is not the norm, right? You do a series of bad things, have a series of bad choices, and it's going to be harder to find employment. So just realize that this all comes out. Nothing gets hidden. If you have any sort of nefarious history, doesn't mean you can't be employed, as long as it doesn't include vulnerable people, elderly, children, sick people. If it's over 10 years old, you can work for healthcare organizations. If you have absolutely anything in your history, do not apply to a financial organization. Banks, anything of any sort that deals with finances. Now, companies that have financial departments, that's not the same. But I'm talking actual financial credit organizations. Don't touch them. It won't be in your best interest. Generally speaking, contracting companies don't vet you before they present you. So you might actually get offered a job and then have it yanked out from under you before you get there because you didn't pass the background check. So keep that in mind. It's a reality check. You can make lives different. You don't have to say, I cannot be employed. Okay? There's also employment contracts. What do those look like? You have an initial job offer. Most people are so just damn happy to be offered a job that they don't read it. It's like a EULA. It's got your firstborn child in there. So you must read job offers, right? There may be security policies that are in writing that you're going to have to sign off on. More than likely, you're going to have to attend some training. There might be contingencies built into it. Employment contingent upon agreement, meaning you agree to the policies, background check comes back clean, etc. And basically, once you've passed that, then you're hired. Now, what does that mean in Washington State when you're hired? I pay you, you do work for me based on what we agreed. I could still fire you in a week or two because I just don't like how you look, or you smell, or what you drive. I mean, it's an at-will work state. What that means is I don't need a reason to let you go. So that generally applies to all jobs, unless there's a union involved. It can be a little bit messy with a union. And then a lot of jobs, especially state employment, have a probationary period. That means, okay, the union, yes, will protect you, and there are extra policies that will protect you, but you're ours for 6 months before we decide whether that's going to work or not. You want a new hire orientation. If one is not provided to you, you definitely want to get one. Actually, I should add another one here. You should ask for a mentor. This is a person that has been around the company a while and knows the rules, so they can help guide you, answer your questions, give you who to go and ask for a certain thing. That's really important. You're going to basically also find out what access should be provided to you by levels of organization. So one of the hardest ones in organizations, once you get working in the securing of an organization, is when someone changes a job. So they were an administrative secretary under, say, sales, and they move under the VP of HR. Well, their role has changed, but sometimes their rights don't change right away. You need to try to enforce that. It's so much harder. And then at the time of the employee's start, you should really be understanding exactly what your job is. It shouldn't be, well, there's the server room over there. Everything that falls under technology is yours. That's pretty vague. It's going to mean long hours and weekends for you, by the way. So it helps to get much more defined in your job description. On-the-job security training, ethics training. It's the first thing I put up there. Awareness training. What are the rules for how security is applied? You really want the forefront of people's minds when they enter an organization, what security should look like. And then also you can have brown bag lunches and security seminars where people can have questions answered. You should also have a situation where you have an omnibudsman or open door policy where you're not impacted by coming and telling about a problem. Fear within an organization can make it so people withhold telling you that that problem existed. And that actually was probably one of the problems at Equifax. People feared to lose their job if they told exactly what was going on. And then performance evaluations. You should see these once a year. Too often they become very redundant. Sales likes them quarterly or every 6 months because it drives performance. In other parts of the organization, I'm doing bi-yearly, so twice a year I get to do performance reviews. And I can tell you they're not as beneficial as yearly. But it can keep me moving faster. And then termination. What happens when you get cut loose? I've actually focused a lot of my career around the termination process. Part of that was I worked for a very large organization called homegrocer.com when they were bought out. And that meant that thousands of people at the corporate campus needed to be let go in a very short period of time within a 3-month window. That's not rapid, that's pretty rapid. But that means every day you're shedding people, and you need to make sure you get their equipment and anything that was given to them, and make sure that their desks are emptied and all the stuff that they own goes with them and nothing more. Does that make sense? But you want to make that process not feel like they're being scrutinized, not feel like they're being walked out by security and handed the box. Okay, it's not really a good process. Also, you will find, I've had this happen a lot in my career, you're going to get a call at like 9 a.m. on Friday morning, and you're going to get a call and it's going to say, we're going to have a person in HR, this person's name is such and such, between 2 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We need you to make sure you close all access to their accounts after they walk away from their desk. That happens a lot. And you're expected to be very confidential and not share this information and not tell dirty details and do it calmly, quietly, and without a whole lot of fuss. And you're going to be following whatever corporate policies are involved. You should have a checklist. You should make sure that everything is inventoried, nothing is destroyed, and be aware that employees themselves may be collecting information for future use. So you might want to look at logs to see what kind of activity has been prior to them leaving. Hostile terminations, even the non-hostile terminations are different than the hostile terminations. There's still an angry person going out the door at 3 o'clock, right? Hostile ones are termination for cause, not just downsizing, but other kinds of layoffs. And those can have all sorts of aggression involved. You do not need to be physical. You're IS. You don't need to be involved in physical confrontations. We don't do that, right? You're locking accounts. You're shutting off systems. You're making sure the key card doesn't work, all that kind of stuff. HR is going to do the hostile side. But you just need to be prepared to do what they need you to do. Friendly terminations are something completely different. I've chosen to leave the company. I'm having a party, and then, I'm going to probably leave early on Friday because it's my last day. I do have short timers because I'm leaving the company. I'm probably not going to do a whole lot of work in my last week, but I should be willing to help you out and not withhold. And that's partly we're just parting ways gently and quietly. I would say that a majority of your terminations should fall into this category, and you should leave with a lot of a sense of humility and thank you, and it doesn't matter what nasty things have happened in the past. Never go to HR and say, well, and they're going to ask you for it. They're going to say, so this is our termination interview, and we want to know how it was for you here. That's not an invite to grouse. It's not an invite to go and throw your manager under the bus, because I'll guarantee you our world is very small and you may come across that person in the future. It's never in your interest to go out in a blaze of glory. I don't care how grumpy you are. Hold it in. Go home, drink beer, and talk to your buddies about it. Okay? Don't do it there. This is from experience. Nothing ever comes of it. It doesn't make you feel any better. It doesn't do anything. It won't harm anybody, but technically it harms your character and your future. Casual labor security concerns, this is more of the issue where you're hiring vendors or you're hiring temporary workers, contractors, someone to cover for the help desk or cover for customer service or even cover for reception. Those people have a lot of access, don't they? When that person's there, they don't need the same access. They're just there temporarily. So you need to find a way, instruct the people who perform the tasks around that person not to allow them to have access. Don't allow them to log into that person's account. They answer the phone, they do whatever, but they're not going to get full access during their term. Temporary employees are often hired to serve as supplement the workforce. They may be given more elevated privileges temporarily, You need to have their account set to terminate at a certain time, or not terminate, but just lock at a certain window. So one place we took care of this was every 30 days, if the manager did not tell us this person was on staff, because they were hiring and firing lots of people over time, contractors for programming, if they didn't tell us by the last business day of the month, we would shut off their account at 5 o'clock on Friday. So that meant on Monday, or if anybody wanted to work over the weekend, they didn't have access. We'd shut down key cards, and we basically froze them over the weekend, and then on Monday, their manager could talk about it. It only takes one time through a manager to get this straight, right? When half their team of 30 can't get in because they were all hired the previous month, and they came over the border. Not the border, but over the border of that month. Contractors and consultants, again, they might have elevated presence. We almost always, when somebody's coming, a vendor or a consultant or a contractor, we have them escorted. They don't have the ability to just wander the building. The longer you're there, the more likely they're going to trust you and say, oh, I don't need to follow you to the bathroom. You know where it is. No, you got to stick with that. When I go to PayPal and eBay, they give me a really big, ugly visitor badge. It is this big. So there's no chance to not miss that I'm a visitor, right? And sometimes I forget it and I'll leave it in the room. And it's weird because I'm not molested anymore. Every 20 feet, hi, how you doing? Where are you from? Yeah. That's important. When we talk about visitors from the outside, we need to keep that in mind. Business partners. You might have strategic alliances with other organizations. That doesn't mean they get full unfettered access to your network, but systems might integrate. Now, you need some deliberate processes put in place to show responsibility and limitation, not just give them full access. This was more of a problem when we first started installing EDI, or electronic interchange between organizations, especially with shipping. Now, there's more barriers put in place, but initially it was more of a problem. And you also have non-disclosure agreements. Anytime someone can get in and see what you're doing, you need a non-disclosure and non-compete involved. Separation of duties and collusion. Hiring same family members. This is where the people who are dating in an organization comes from. Not that you're going to be doing that at work. That's not what they're concerned about. They're concerned that one of you is going to convince the other to do something nefarious. That's what that's about, not having to do with the relationships themselves. So that in mind, it comes down to behavior. You will come to organizations where you will have family members working there, and they will be given special deference or preference in the workplace. That is an open door for collusion, right? If you have somebody that shares your same problem, like gambling, that's an open door for collusion. So this is why organizations want to know if you're interested in gambling. How many people gamble? Okay. I wouldn't go to work and say, my favorite hobby is to go down to the casino and gamble. And because that actually is a red flag, right? Because you potentially have a lot of risk associated with you. So keep in mind, it's more of the collusions, the unscrupulous workers using power over one another in one form or another. Job rotation is one way to reduce that risk. It's more common in financial departments where you have a required vacation you go on every year. You are required to leave town for a week or 2 weeks and go on vacation. That's so somebody else can do your job and find out what you've been doing, if you've been doing anything nefarious. I have companies that I don't go on vacation all year long, and they're like, gotta go. I'm like, all right. Feel free to look at my email account anytime you want to. It's all good. So that's where we get the two-man control and separation of duties. Separation of duties means one person has to do a thing and then hand it off to another for the next step. Two-man control means we both have to review each other's work, not that we actually have a step process. The privacy of personnel data, they have there's laws to protect your sensitive information, PII, in healthcare, in organizations that own it, right? They own your data. Equifax, we'll give them as an example. They are required by law to protect it. Each account that gets loose is worth a $100,000 regulatory fine. big numbers, dollar signs are now going off. It means nothing to you. It's all federal government. Equifax is really in a tight place now. If I had stock in Equifax, if they were publicly traded, and I had stock, I'd be dumping that sucker. Because, and by the way, just prior to the announcement that they had a breach, part of why the CIO and CISO were let go is because they sold off stock, both unethical and against the law. That's against SEC laws from the federal government. Your employee addresses, phone numbers, it's all confidential information. How much of that information do you think is kept in, not medical conditions, but the phone numbers, addresses, and their name? How much of that do you think is kept in the global address list in Exchange? Too much of it, because you populate Active Directory with it. So that means everybody that has the ability to look at Active Directory has access to all the information. Also, it's in the global address list. So if you come to a company, no matter how large it is, and you see personal phone numbers or addresses in their global address list, you got a number one thing you can bring up only after you've been there a little while. Okay? And you can say, you know, if somebody asks, what should we change? Raise your hand. Say, well, I think like scrubbing our global address list would be a really good idea. If you have that information in there, what ends up happening is somebody gets the wild idea that they're going to join a travel club, and they're going to give all those names and numbers to the travel club because they get a sign-on bonus for everybody, like $100, everybody that joins. That's not their information. They don't own it. It's actually a breach of company policy to be doing that if you've got a policy in place, right? And then you can get fired for that, of course, because now you've gone ahead and used personal information for personal gain, or company information for personal gain. Also, the same thing extends to customers, patients, business relationships. So in summary, really, it's about positioning both the organization and your security team to align as best as possible. The issues and concerns in both instances revolve around security, right, and vetting employees. The professional credentials of individuals become really important. It's important if you realize that your CISSP is tied to your career and your character. So if you wonder why a CISSP is required for people upper levels in certain upper levels of an organization in certain very sensitive places, it's because you have gone through an extensive vetting process to get it in the first place. You cannot even apply to test unless somebody says, I vouch for this person, I will let you test. So there is a process behind that, and the more people that come into it, the more likely is that it's not going to apply, right? But right now it's still a good standard. There's policies and practices that are going to guide your behavior, similar to laws, but they're organizational laws. And then you need special precautions for non-employees. They need to be escorted, they need to be vetted in a different way, and they need to have a responsibility agreement in place. Separation of duties outside of finance needs to be employed. Doesn't matter where we are in the organization, we do need to have a separation of duties. And there might be special requirements needed for privacy of personnel data, because it might not be assumed that you should not share the every company does this. They send out a paper copy to put on your desk or in your desk of the employee contact list. And sometimes it's got personal numbers on it, but not always. Some are just desk phones, right? That's a social engineer gold mine. If I could get my hands on one of those, because now I'm going to call, I'm going to make believe I'm somebody. Okay, TCC's got these things floating all over the place. Those are a perfect way of learning about an organization and finding your way in. Now, in a government organization, there's transparency, right? So in a certain way, we cannot stop those phone numbers from getting out, can we? Or email addresses. That's why employee training becomes so much more important, because the employee needs to know how to be distrusting. Okay. Questions?